Have you ever wondered why more and more people are choosing to leave Canada, a country once synonymous with opportunity and prosperity? What happened to the Canadian dream, the vision of raising a family in a comfortable home, nestled in a safe neighborhood, with the security of a stable life? Today, the reality for many Canadians is far from that dream. Instead, it's a story of skyrocketing housing costs, mounting debt, and a government that seems increasingly out of touch with the struggles of its people. How did we get here? Let's take a closer look. It all began on a cool autumn evening in 2015, October 19th to be exact. That night, Canadians went to the polls in record numbers, driven by a deep dissatisfaction with the direction the country was heading. As the votes were tallied, a clear victor emerged, Justin Trudeau. The air was electric as Trudeau took the stage, greeted by cheers from an enthusiastic crowd. His message was clear and simple. It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change. Across the nation, there was a renewed sense of hope. Canadians believed that under Trudeau's leadership, their country was on the cusp of a golden age. Promises of more affordable housing, a better quality of life, and a brighter future for all were enough to reignite the Canadian dream. But fast forward to today, and that dream has become a distant memory for many. The vision of a prosperous, affordable Canada has been replaced by a harsh reality. The question is, what went wrong? The housing crisis. One of the most glaring issues is housing. Remember when owning a home was seen as a cornerstone of the Canadian dream? Well, today, that dream feels more like a fantasy. Housing prices have skyrocketed to levels that were unimaginable just a few years ago. To put this into perspective, let's talk numbers. The average family in Canada needs to earn around $170,000 a year to buy a home. In Vancouver, this figure jumps to an astonishing $360,000 annually. Now, consider that the median family income in Canada is just $70,000. The math simply doesn't add up. Home ownership, once attainable for almost everyone, has become a near impossibility for most Canadians. And it's not just about the numbers. It's about the emotional toll. Imagine growing up with dreams of buying a cozy home, raising a family, and living in a safe, welcoming neighborhood. Now, imagine watching that dream slip further and further out of reach. Many Canadians have simply given up on the idea of ever owning a home. The hope that once defined the Canadian dream has been replaced by a sense of despair. Even for those who can afford to buy, the reality is far from ideal. In cities like Vancouver, the average home costs nearly $2 million. And what do you get for that price? Often, it's a small, modest house, nothing close to the mansions you could afford in other parts of the world for the same amount of money. The question many Canadians are asking is, why spend so much for so little? The rental market struggle. But what if you don't want to buy a home? Surely renting is a viable option, right? Unfortunately, the rental market in Canada is just as bleak. Years of underbuilding, combined with population growth and government red tape, have led to an extreme shortage of rental units. The national rental vacancy rate sits at a historic low of just 1.5%. This means that for every apartment available, there are hundreds of people fighting to secure it. The competition is fierce, and renters are left feeling hopeless. Many are forced to make heartbreaking choices. Do they keep a roof over their heads, or do they keep the lights on and food on the table? It's becoming increasingly difficult to do both. The low vacancy rates have led to soaring rents. Landlords, aware that renters have few options, are hiking up prices to maximize their profits. Imagine this. In cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is nearly $3,000 a month. After taxes and rent, many Canadians barely have enough money left to make ends meet. Some are skipping meals, taking on multiple jobs, or even living in their cars just to survive. And the sad truth is, debt has become a necessity for many just to get by. Canada now has the third highest household debt to GDP ratio in the world. This isn't just a financial issue, it's a crisis of hope and well-being. Canadians are increasingly feeling like the system is rigged against them. Government policies and the immigration factor. So, who or what is to blame for this crisis? Many point to the government's policies as a significant factor. Since Justin Trudeau took office, Canada has seen the largest increase in real estate prices in its history. But why? A major driver of this increase is the government's immigration policy. Since 2016, Canada has admitted nearly 3 million immigrants, a record number that is 40% higher per year than in previous decades. While immigration has its benefits, this rapid population growth has put enormous pressure on an already underbuilt housing market. It's simple economics. Increasing demand without increasing supply leads to higher prices. Most of these new immigrants are looking for entry-level homes and apartments, which means they're competing directly with young and average Canadians who are also trying to find a place to live. The result? Even more pressure on housing prices and availability. For example, at the University of British Columbia, UBC, many students can't find housing and are forced to live in vans or parking lots just to get by. One student even flies in from a different city because it's cheaper than paying rent in Vancouver. Rooming houses, where landlords cram multiple students into small spaces to maximize profit have become all too common. But it's not just immigration that's driving up prices. Canada has underinvested in housing for decades. Developers argue that Canada needs 5 million more homes by 2030 to meet affordability targets. Yet, achieving this seems impossible given the current pace of development. Local governments often resist new housing projects due to NIMBYism, not in my backyard, and bureaucratic hurdles. Citizens who already own homes frequently oppose new developments, fearing that it will lower their property values. On top of that, taxes and red tape add significant costs to housing development. In some cities, these can add over 20% to the cost of a new home, costs that are inevitably passed on to consumers, foreign investment, and money laundering. And then there's the issue of foreign investment. Canada is seen as a safe and attractive place to invest money, but it's also one of the easiest places in the OECD to launder money. Reports commissioned by the government have revealed that significant amounts of black market money are being used to buy and sell properties in cities like Vancouver and Toronto. Despite these findings, the government has done little to address the issue. Money laundering remains as easy as ever, contributing to the inflated housing market. Rising cost of living. But housing isn't the only issue. The cost of living in Canada has been steadily rising, making life even more challenging for the average Canadian. Food prices, for instance, have increased by over 10% since 2022. This has led to nearly 2 million Canadians relying on food banks in March of 2023 alone, a record high and double the number from just a few years ago. One of the reasons for these high food prices is the lack of competition in the grocery industry. A handful of companies own nearly 80% of the market, allowing them to control prices and extract maximum profits. The government's policies have also played a role in this. By protecting industries like poultry, egg, and dairy, the government has added nearly $450 per year to the average Canadian family's food bill. That's money that could make the difference between making rent or not. The carbon tax controversy. And then there's the carbon tax. Introduced as a way to combat climate change, the carbon tax has also made life more expensive for Canadians. It has increased the cost of gas and heating, which are essential expenses for most households. Canadians now spend more on gas than citizens of any other G7 country. The tax has been met with significant pushback from both citizens and politicians. In fact, the Liberal government recently dropped the tax in the Atlantic provinces due to overwhelming opposition. While the government argues that most citizens are better off due to rebates, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has clarified that Canadians are actually worse off when the broader economic implications are considered. Telecommunications and banking costs. But the cost of living crisis doesn't end there. Canada also has some of the highest telecommunications and banking costs in the world. The wireless market in Canada is 7 times more expensive than in Australia, and 1,000 times more expensive than in Finland. This is largely due to the lack of competition. When the 4th largest telecom player, Shaw, was recently acquired by Rogers, the government did nothing to stop it. The banking sector is similarly concentrated, with tight regulatory controls that favor large entities. This lack of competition has led to Canadians paying some of the highest banking fees in the developed world, an estimated $250 more per year than their peers in the UK and Australia. Economic decline and the talent exodus. So with all these challenges, what's the solution? Many believe that growing the economy and creating high-paying jobs is the answer. However, Canada has struggled in this area. Since 2019, the country has seen a decline in economic productivity, while the US has surged ahead. Canada is one of only 5 countries in the world that has seen a decline in private sector investment over the last 5 years. High market concentration in major industries has reduced the incentive for companies to invest and innovate. Sectors like grocery, telecom, banking, and air travel are dominated by a few big players, leading to less competition and higher prices for consumers. Canada's energy sector, once a major driver of the economy, has also been in decline. Federal policies have led to a 60% drop in investment in this sector, causing the economy to shrink by more than $100 billion over the last 5 years. Attempts to grow the economy through investments in technology and industrial production have largely failed. As a result, many Canadians are leaving the country. Startups are relocating to the US, where opportunities are better, and even ordinary citizens are moving to escape the high costs and lack of opportunities at home. Conclusion. So, where does this leave Canada? The country is facing a crisis of hope. Rising housing costs, an unaffordable rental market, increasing debt, and declining economic productivity are all contributing to a sense of despair among Canadians. The Canadian dream, once a symbol of prosperity and opportunity, is fading away. But all is not lost. There are solutions to these problems, solutions that involve addressing the root causes of the crisis, from housing and immigration policies inefficiencies to the lack of competition in major industries. It will take bold leadership and a willingness to make tough choices. The question is, will the current government rise to the challenge? With that said, if you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay informed about the issues that matter most. Let's keep this conversation going.